to yet another election prediction, and this time, as you can see, it's 2028 election between JD Vance and Kamala Harris. So you guys seem to like my last JD Vance video, so I'm going to publish yet another one. And let's imagine Vance runs against Harris, who happens to run again in 2028. I do think that this is relatively likely, unless Harris does run for the governor election in California, which is a possibility. As we can see, look at her Wikipedia page post vice presidency. She is touted as a candidate in the 2026 governor election of California, where she does lead the polls among Democrats and among all candidates in general. She actually is barely leading in this race when considering everybody, but she's still leading nonetheless. And the Democrat is almost certainly going to win. So it is a possibility that she does become governor of California. But if she doesn't do that, she will likely run for president yet again. And even if she does become governor, it's possible she governs for 2 years and then runs for the presidency. So in any case, make sure to like and subscribe for more election predictions like this. And let's see who would win between Harris and Vance if they were to run against one another. So let's get started with some of the safe states. So Harris, of course, is winning the West Coast. California is easily going to Harris, whereas Vance has some states of his own. And let's just get through these safe states real quick because it's the same thing every single time. And during that, I'm just going to talk to you about some things. So Vance is the current vice president, as you guys know, and he's not necessarily unpopular, not necessarily too popular either, but Trump does basically de facto endorse him for the presidency, for the nomination when it comes time in 2028. So it is likely that Vance will be the candidate against Kamala Harris, rather. So we'll see if Vance does get the nomination, which I think he will. Will he win this election? So he already is losing 122 to 167, but Vance does pick up Ohio, Alaska, and Florida. These states will go to Vance pretty easily. Remember, Florida went to Trump by 13 against Harris. Harris is not popular in any of these states that I just chose, including Texas as well, which will go to JD Vance, bringing Vance to an early lead 212 to 167. So we can see that Harris back in 2024, she really didn't do well. She lost the popular vote against Donald Trump. But yet again, Donald Trump is more popular than JD Vance in my opinion. I do think Trump's electoral stock, as we'll call it, went down when he did pick JD Vance. Because, I mean, a lot of people see Trump as just the big brother or the father in some ways of JD Vance. And Vance is just kind of like the secondary guy, like kind of Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Vance isn't really like the main guy. And I don't know if people could ever see him as the main guy. So I do think he will do worse than Trump, but relatively similar in many regards. He'll win Iowa for this reason, but Harris will win the state of New Jersey. She'll also win Virginia. Moreover, Harris will win Colorado and New Mexico. So now we get to the states that basically were up for contention back in 2024. The state of Maine did go to Harris pretty significantly. Will go to Harris once more, whereas Maine's second will go to JD Vance. In 2024, Harris did pick Tim Walz as vice president nominee for Minnesota. He's from Minnesota. He's the governor. And, it probably would have looked more similar to this if she didn't, but she still did win Minnesota by 4, and I can't imagine she would pick Tim Walz once more. So, Minnesota, we don't quite know where that will land. One state that we do know where it will land is the state of Georgia, where Trump won pretty significantly. He won by 2 points back in 2024. It shifted to the right pretty significantly, and I do think Vance will win in the state of Georgia. One thing Trump had against him is the fact that Trump is a billionaire, so it seems a little bit hypocritical, some of the things he's saying. Also, Harris gets Nebraska second. But in any case, Trump does seem a little hypocritical at times, like, I'm working for the working class American. Oh, yeah, he's a billionaire. Vance doesn't really have that against him because Vance has the typical rags to riches story. Vance is pretty inspirational, love him or hate him. Look at this. He grew up in Appalachia and then went to Yale and then is now the vice president of the United States. So he has that going for him. And I think working class voters in Georgia will appreciate that. I also think North Carolina will as well, bringing Vance up to 251 electoral votes. Also, Nevada, the no taxes on tips from Donald Trump was to get like some of those working class people, working class restaurant, etc. workers voting for Trump. I think, especially if Trump is successful with no taxes on tips, that Vance will do well in the state of Nevada. I think he will win the state of Nevada. However, I do think Harris will do better in the state of Minnesota than Vance. I mean, she won't pick Walz, but she will still win the state. I think she'll pick someone like Josh Shapiro or maybe even Gretchen Whitmer, someone like that. And she'll also win the state of New Hampshire, even though it does currently have a Republican governor. However, with these next four states, we look at the state of Arizona. Trump won it pretty significantly, and I do think Vance will win the state in 2028. I mean, when Trump was an incumbent, he was at his all-time low in terms of popularity. He still almost won these three states. And in 2028, let's say Trump is at an all-time low, Republicans are at an all-time low in popularity. These states will still go to Vance nonetheless, and Vance can distance himself from Trump in that scenario. But if Trump is popular in 2028, then it seems like the election for Vance will be a slam dunk. I'm not quite sure where the cards will land. Judging by approval rating, it does seem like Trump may be relatively unpopular towards that time. So it might not be a slam dunk for JD Vance. But as always, Vance can kind of position himself as I'm different from Trump. I was his VP. I did have that interaction with Zelensky, but I am different. I was raised differently. I again am more moderate, etc. So I do think Vance can go that route, but many traditional Republicans may find it as a little bit demeaning. Like Vance was basically Trump's second-hand man, and then he goes that route. So I do think he'll try to play a little bit of a middle ground, in some ways, still supporting Trump, but also saying he's a different person. So I do think that's what Vance is going to do, and I do think it'll help him in these Midwest states. I think it'll help him in the state of Wisconsin, where Trump barely lost it in 2020 and he won it in 2024. Not by too much, though. I think he will also win the state of Michigan. Trump won it pretty significantly considering its status as a swing state, 1.4 points. People were not expecting that, but he did win the state of Michigan pretty by a decent bit. I think Vance will barely win the state of Michigan, and as we get polls coming out, we'll see it'll give us a better perspective on what will happen in the state of Michigan. But already, Vance has already won, so it really doesn't matter at this point. We just want to see how much of a cushion Vance will have, because if you're a Harris supporter, you don't want Vance to have a cushion. If you're a Trump supporter / Vance supporter, you want to see Vance have that cushion just in case, because any state that's decided by less than a percentage point, you really can't predict that well. So you do want to see a cushion. Like, for example, going into the 2024 election, I thought Trump would win all the swing states, and he did. Even if he didn't win like one or two, he still would have won the election. In 2020, Biden didn't win North Carolina. He still won the election. So you want to keep watching to see what will happen. I think if Harris picks Whitmer, she does win the state of Michigan, but still we see Vance wins the election. But I don't know if she'll pick Whitmer. I don't think she will. So Vance will win Michigan. I think if she picks Shapiro, it will narrowly go to her, bringing it to 245 to 293. But at the end of the day, I think Vance will win the state of Pennsylvania, because I don't think that Harris will pick Josh Shapiro. I think she'll do some random pick. I don't even know who, but some random pick that, again, people won't like. But again, Pennsylvania is going to JD Vance in this scenario. Even if Harris wins one of the two states, she's still losing this election. So there we have it. Vance wins 312 to 226 against Kamala Harris. So to the Democrats, maybe it is better if Kamala Harris becomes governor of California and doesn't run for the presidency. And to the Republicans, Vance doesn't seem like a horrible pick. He would win against Kamala Harris. We'll see if he'll win against any mainstream candidates like Gretchen Whitmer or Roy Cooper in future videos, but against Kamala Harris, he does win this election. So make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and yeah, leave a comment to let me know what you think. I like making these videos. I want to continue to do so. And yeah, try to get me to 100K. That would be really cool. So yeah, see ya.